We begin in the mountains of northern Portugal, in a place called Cistelo. You have probably never heard of it. Most people have not, and that is exactly why it is still what it is. To reach Cistelo, you follow a road that winds and climbs along the edge of a river valley in the Peneda Gerês region. The road is narrow, trees press close on both sides, and then, without warning, the valley opens. The village sits on a series of terraced hillsides that have been shaped by human hands over many centuries. Each terrace holds a small garden, or a chestnut grove, or a low stone wall covered in soft green moss. The whole hillside looks like it was stitched together by someone who had all the time in the world. The houses here are made of dark gray schist, a kind of layered stone that splits into flat pieces like pages of a book. The walls have absorbed so many seasons of rain and sun that they no longer look built so much as grown, as if they simply rose from the ground the way the trees did. There are maybe 100 people living here, perhaps fewer. The streets are not streets so much as paths, worn smooth by generations of feet and animals and cartwheels. You walk them slowly. There is no other way. In the mornings, the valley fills with mist. It comes up from the river below and pools between the terraces, soft and white and slow. The village floats above it. The rooftops emerge first, then the chimneys, then the garden wall, and the whole scene looks like something drawn in charcoal on pale paper. Cistelo has been called the Portuguese Tibet, and standing here in that mist, watching the terraces emerge from white, you begin to understand why. The water is everywhere in this village. Little streams run between the terraces, channeled through ancient stone gutters. You hear it before you see it. That soft, constant sound of water moving over rock. It is the sound of the village breathing. There are grapevines here too, trained along low pergolas that cast dappled shade over the paths below. In the summer, the leaves are green and wide and bright. In the autumn, they turn to amber and gold, and in the winter, the bare vines trace delicate patterns against the gray stone walls. I sat on a wall at the edge of the village one afternoon and watched the sun move across the terraces. The light shifted slowly. The shadows of the chestnut trees stretched and shortened and stretched again. A cat appeared on a rooftop across the valley, sat for a moment, then disappeared. Time passed, but gently. From Portugal, we travel east and north into the heart of Spain, to a place that most Spanish people have never even visited, a village called Ainsa, in the foothills of the Pyrenees in Aragon. The medieval quarter of Ainsa sits on a rocky promontory above the confluence of two rivers. It has been there, in one form or another, for more than 1,000 years, and the view from its ancient plaza is one of those views that makes you stop walking and simply stand. The central square, the Plaza Mayor, is long and arcaded on both sides. The arches are low and rounded, made of golden limestone that glows warm in the afternoon sun. The stones underfoot are worn smooth and uneven. On a quiet morning, with the cafes not yet open, and the mist still sitting in the river valleys below, you have the whole square to yourself. Ainsa was reconquered from the Moors in the early 8th century, and the Romanesque church that anchors one end of the square dates to the 11th. It is a simple building. Heavy walls, small windows, a bell tower that seems to lean very slightly, as if it is listening to something far away. The streets that run off the main square are narrow and cobbled. They bend and dip and occasionally open onto unexpected views. A gap between houses revealing a sudden depth of valley, or a rooftop terrace where someone has planted lavender in terracotta pots. Below the medieval hill, the modern village is quiet but unremarkable. But up here, in the old quarter, you are somewhere else entirely, somewhere slower, somewhere that still smells of cool stone and old wood and the particular mineral scent of rain on limestone. The Pyrenees rise to the north. Even in late spring, they hold snow on their highest peaks. You can see them from Ainsa, white and distant and enormous, framing the horizon beyond the river valley. They make the village feel very small and very sheltered, like something held in cupped hands. At dusk, the swallows come. Hundreds of them, cutting rapid arcs above the rooftop, filling the sky with their curved shadows and their high, thin call. They appear just as the light turns golden, and they stay until dark. And by the time they are gone, the first stars are out above the mountains. We cross the Pyrenees now and descend into France, into a region called the Dordogne, where the limestone cliffs rise pale and sheer from the edges of river valley, and the villages cling to them like birds' nests on a wall. The village I want to take you to is called Beynak-e-Kazanak. It is not entirely unknown, but it is far enough from the main tourist routes and small enough that it retains something real, something that has not yet been organized and smoothed for outside consumption. Beynak sits at the base of a great limestone cliff, and above it, on the very edge of the cliff's flat top, stands a castle, the Chateau de Beynak. It has been there since the 12th century, and it has never fallen to ruin the way so many medieval buildings have. It stands intact and heavy and watchful above the village and the river. The Dordogne River below is wide and green and slow at this point. Canoes drift along it in the summer, small bright specks against the dark green water. On the opposite bank, willows trail their fingers in the current. Herons stand motionless in the shallows. The village itself is a single street, essentially, a narrow road that runs along the base of the cliff, with houses pressing close on both sides. The houses are built of the same golden cream limestone as the cliff behind them. In the late afternoon sun, they almost disappear into it, glowing the same warm color as the stone they rest against. There are window boxes everywhere in Beynak. Geraniums, mostly red and pink and orange, bright against the pale stone. Bougainvillea climbs some of the walls in long purple cascade, and at the base of the cliff, where water seeps through the limestone, there are ferns and mosses in deep, constant green. Walking up to the castle, you follow a path that climbs steeply through the village, then out onto the open cliff top. The view from the top is one of the great views of France. The river curves away in both directions below you, silver and green and wide. The valley is flat and lush, and on the opposite bank, other villages are visible in the distance, each one a cluster of pale rooftops and church towers, each one holding its own history. Standing up there, with the wind off the river and the shadow of the castle at your back, you feel the length of time that this place has witnessed, the wars and the harvests, and the floods and the droughts, the long, slow accumulation of human life in one small place. We move now into Central Europe, into a country that often surprises people with its beauty, Slovenia. Most visitors to Slovenia go to Lake Bled. It is magnificent, and it deserves its fame. But the village I want to show you is deeper in the country, in a valley called the Socha, where the river runs a color that seems impossible, a color that belongs more to a painting than to a real place. The village is called Drezhnica, and it sits above the valley on a series of gentle slopes, looking down at the Socha River and across at the great limestone walls of the Julian Alps. The Socha is turquoise, not blue-green in the way that mountain rivers sometimes are, but a deep, clear, vivid turquoise that seems to glow from within. It is colored by the minerals it carries from the mountains above, and in certain lights, the bright light of midday or the low-angled light of morning, it looks almost luminous, as if there is a light source somewhere beneath the surface. Drezhnica itself is a small farming village, stone houses painted in muted colors, cream, pale yellow, terracotta, kitchen gardens with neat rows of vegetables, apple trees and pear trees leaning over low stone walls, and behind every house, the view, that impossible river, those enormous mountains. The people of the Socha Valley have a particular resilience. This region was the site of some of the most brutal fighting of the First World War. The Isonzo Front, as it was called, saw 12 major battles and hundreds of thousands of casualties along this valley and these mountain ridges. Standing in Drezhnica, looking at this gentle beauty, that history is hard to hold in the mind, but it is there. It lives in the old men who remember their grandfathers' stories, in the small roadside shrines, in the old fortifications that still stand on the ridges above. But the valley has healed. The river runs clear and cold and vivid. The meadows are full of wildflowers in the spring and early summer. The air smells of pine and cold water, and the particular clean sharpness of high altitude. In the evenings, the light on the western faces of the mountains turns a deep orange-pink. The color lingers for a long time after the sun has set, and then the sky goes blue-gray, and the first bats appear over the river, and the frogs begin in the meadows below the village, and the night comes softly and completely. We travel southeast now to a country that has only recently become easier to visit and is still revealing itself to the wider world, Albania. I know what you may be thinking. Albania is not a country most people associate with hidden beauty, with unspoiled village, with the kind of quietness I have been describing. But the mountain regions of southern Albania, the area known as Gjirokastra, and the villages of the Zagorje hold some of the most extraordinary landscapes in all of Europe. And the village I want to take you to is called Voskopoja, or rather, what remains of Voskopoja was once one of the great cities of the Ottoman Balkan. In the 18th century, it was home to perhaps 30,000 people, a cosmopolitan trading center with printing presses, schools, and dozens of churches. It had guilds and merchants and craftsmen and scholars. By some accounts, it was among the most educated cities in all of Europe at that time. Then, it was destroyed several times by invaders and by war, and by the long, slow poverty of the 20th century. What remains is a village of a few hundred souls, set on a high plateau at around 1,200 meters elevation, surrounded by beech forest, crossed by cold, clear stream, and scattered with the ruins and survivors of those extraordinary 18th century churches. The churches of Voskopoja are something apart. They are decorated inside with frescoes painted by the Zografi brothers, master painters of the Balkan Baroque tradition. The colors are still vivid in some of them, deep red and gold and ultramarine, saints and angels and scenes from the Gospels painted with an expressiveness and a humanity that you do not always find in the more formal Byzantine tradition. The village around these churches is quiet, almost too quiet. The plateau feels remote, even today. The road that climbs to it from the valley below is narrow and uneven in place, and arriving is a little like stepping into a place that time has not entirely forgotten, but has certainly overlooked. The forests around Voskopoja are ancient, beech trees with trunks as wide as cars, their roots emerging from the ground in great, gnarled curves. The forest floor is a deep, soft carpet of last year's leaves, and in early spring, before the leaves come fully, the light falls through the bare branches in long, slanted shafts. There are wild herbs here, sage and oregano, and something sharper that I never identified, growing in clusters along the stone walls and at the edges of the meadows. The air smells of them always, especially in the warmth of the afternoon. It is a melancholy place, in the best sense of that word. A place that holds its loss gently, without bitterness. A place that has decided, perhaps, to simply continue, to let the forests grow and the churches stand and the streams run, and to ask nothing more of the world than to be left in peace. Moving north and west now, into the Alps, into Switzerland, but not the Switzerland of ski resorts and famous lake shores, into a deep valley in the canton of Valais, where the road ends and a village called Albinen sits above the valley floor on a south-facing ledge of rock. Albinen is very small, few dozen houses, a church with an onion dome, and a view of the Rhone Valley below that is simply staggering, wide and deep and full of light on clear days, with the high peaks of the Bernese Oberland rising white and distant to the north. To reach the village from the valley in the old days, you climbed a system of wooden ladders bolted to the rock face. It is one of the most remarkable facts about this place, that until well into the 20th century, its primary connection to the world below was a series of ladders. Today, there is a road and a cable car, but the ladders still exist, and you can still climb them, and they are still one of the most direct ways to understand what this place is. The houses in Albinen are built in the traditional Valaisian style, dark wood, weathered to near black by decades of alpine sun and winter, stone foundations, overhanging roofs to shed the deep snow of winter. The houses are compact and low-roofed, hunkered against the slope as if bracing against a wind that is not always blowing but has been known to blow. In the summer, the meadows around Albinen are extraordinary. The grasses grow tall and thick, full of wildflowers, blue geraniums, yellow buttercups, pink clover. The air hums with insects. The cowbells from the animals on the upper slopes carry down clearly on still morning. And the silence up here, in the off-season, in the early mornings before the day hikers arrive, is the silence of a place that has always been a little apart from everything. A place that earned its existence through effort, through the willingness to climb. There is something in that, in the idea of a village accessible only by ladder, that speaks to the human need for a place of one's own. A place above the noise. A place where you have to want to be there, have to prove it with your body and your breath before you are admitted. Albanian has in recent years tried to attract new residents by offering incentives for people to move there. It made headlines for a while. I understand why. The village is in danger of what threatens so many of these small alpine places: the slow departure of the young, the closing of the school, the gradual quiet that is not the good kind of quiet, but the silence of abandonment. I hope it does not reach that silence. Standing on the terrace of the church, looking out over the valley, feeling the clean cold of the altitude in my lungs, I could not imagine a life lived here being anything other than remarkable. We travel now to the island of Crete, to the southern coast, where the white mountains, the Lefka Ori, fall steeply to the Libyan Sea. Here, clinging to a gorge that cuts through the mountains like a wound, is the village of Agia Rumeli. But the place I want to take you to is not Agia Rumeli itself. It is the gorge that leads to it, the Samaria Gorge, and the tiny, abandoned village that sits at its heart. Old Samaria, the ruins of the village that once occupied the middle of the gorge, is a place that most people walk through without stop. They are tired by the time they reach it, midway through the 18-kilometer descent. But if you stop here, if you sit on one of the ruined walls and rest, look and listen, you find something exceptional. The gorge walls rise hundreds of meters above you. Vertical white limestone, stained orange and red with mineral. The sky above is a narrow strip of blue, impossibly far up. The river that cut this gorge runs beside you, small now in the summer but clearly formidable in the winter rain. The boulders it has moved are enormous, smoothed and rounded to improbable shapes. The old village consisted of a few dozen houses and a small church. The church still stands, its whitewashed walls brilliant against the rock. Inside, a few icons remain, simple, darkened with age, the faces of the saints barely visible. Someone has left a small candle burning. The villagers who lived here were isolated for much of the year. In the summer, tourists passed through in their thousands, but in the winter, the gorge was closed, the river impassable, the snow lying deep on the plateau above. They were truly alone with each other and with the rock. They were resettled in the 1960s, when the gorge became a national park. Most went to the coast. Their houses fell to ruins slowly, the roofs collapsing under winter snow, the walls being gradually reclaimed by the scrub oaks and oleanders that filled the gorge floor. What remains is not sad, exactly. It is simply returned, the village returning to the gorge continuing its slow work of carving and shaping and wearing, the little church remaining, holding its candle, keeping its vigil. Birds move through the gorge in silence. The Egyptian vulture, white-bodied and black-winged, tilts on the thermals above the walls. Small warblers flit through the undergrowth. The river murmurs. The world outside, the cars and the noise and the speed, does not exist here. It has never existed here. The gorge does not permit it. And now we come to the last village, the furthest north, the most remote. We are in Norway, in the Lofoten Islands, above the Arctic Circle, in a place where the sun does not set in the summer and does not rise in the winter, and the mountains come straight down into the sea. The village is called Nusfjord, and it may be the most complete example of a traditional Norwegian fishing village still existing on Earth. Nusfjord sits at the end of a small fjord, cradled between mountains that drop sheer into the dark blue water. The village consists of a small cluster of red and yellow wooden buildings, the old fishermen's houses, the fish warehouse, the boat shed, the general store, all of them original, all of them maintained, all of them the same color they have been for over 100 years. The red of the buildings is a particular red, a dark, slightly brown red that the Norwegians call redfarge, red color, mixed traditionally with linseed oil and iron oxide. It is the color of lobster shells and autumn leaves and old blood. Against the gray water and gray rock and dark green of the mountain slopes, it is vivid and warm and unexpected. The fjord is very quiet. Mountains absorb sound in the way that open water does not. And in Nusfjord, the quiet is deep and directional. You feel it pressing in from the mountain walls on both sides. The only sounds are the water against the pilings of the docks, the occasional cry of a seagull, and the low creak of the wooden buildings in the wind. In the summer, the sun circles the sky without setting. At midnight, the light on the fjord is the same low golden light as 6 in the evening. The mountains are reflected perfectly in the still water. The red buildings are doubled there, trembling slightly with the movement of the surface. In winter, the opposite. A few hours of gray twilight around midday, then darkness. The northern lights move across the sky above the mountains, green, sometimes yellow, sometimes a faint pink, and the fjord holds their reflections below. The fishing economy that built Nusfjord was brutal work. The men left in January for the cod ground, sailing in open boats in waters that could freeze and storm without warning. They lived in the Rorbu, the small red cabins along the docks, through the season, sleeping on wooden bunks, eating saltfish, waiting for good weather and full nets. Many did not return, but the village endured, and it endures still, protected now as a heritage site, careful not to become a theme park of itself. The balance is delicate, but standing at the end of the dock in the long evening light, watching the mountains hold the sky, I thought that Nusfjord was managing it, that it was still, somehow, itself. I have told you about 10 places now, 10 villages in 10 different countries, each one holding something that the modern world has not yet found and taken, something quiet and specific and irreplaceable. But I want to be honest with you about something. These places are changing, all of them, some more quickly than others. The mist will still rise over the terraces of Sistelo. The swallows will still come at dusk in Ainsa. The Socha will still run its impossible turquoise through the valley below Drezhnica. The vultures will still tilt on the thermals above the Samaria Gorge. But the people who have always lived in these places, the ones who shaped the terraces, and built the ladders and kept the churches and sang the songs, they are fewer with every generation. The young people go to the city. The old ways thin and fade. The buildings that need constant maintenance are not always maintained, and the visitors are coming. Perhaps slowly, perhaps not yet in the numbers that have changed other places, but coming. I am one of them, of course. I know that. Every person who makes a video or writes an article or posts a photograph adds something to the stream that eventually wears a place down. I have thought about this a great deal. What I can offer, the only thing, is this. Go to these places if you go at all, slowly. Stay longer than you plan. Eat in the local restaurant if there is one. Buy something from the local market if there is one. Learn a word of the local language. Ask someone how long their family has been here. Be a guest, not a consumer. Be present, not just a collector of images. The beauty of these villages is real. The wildflowers and the stone walls and the river colors and the mountain silences and the painted churches, all of it is real, and all of it will reach into you if you let it. But the truest beauty of these places is the human one. The fact that people chose these difficult, remote, cold, steep, hot, flood-prone, earthquake-prone, landlocked, sea-battered places and decided to stay, to build, to raise children, to bury parents, to plant gardens, to wait out winters, to begin again in the spring. That is the beauty I kept finding in all of them, not just the view from the castle wall or the color of the river or the shape of the mountain at sunset, but the plain, enormous, ordinary fact of human persistence. The afternoon is ending now. The light is going the way it does at this time of year, slowly and warmly, like someone dimming a lamp by hand rather than reaching for the switch. Somewhere, a stone terrace in Portugal is cooling. A river in Slovenia is catching the last of the light in its turquoise surf. A village in Norway is going quiet as the birds settle and the fjord still. I hope you carry something from this with you, not an urgency to go somewhere, or to photograph something, or to tick something off a list. Just a memory of quietness, of what it feels like to be in a place that has not been hurried, to stand somewhere that has endured, to understand, very simply, that the world holds still places if you are willing to find them. That is enough. That, and the knowledge that they are still there, waiting, patient as stone.